A good time of day to all of you, my chess friends here on the Internet Chess Club. This is Grandmaster Alex Yermolinsky. And, my first show in the year 2016, and have to start it on a sad note. Well, news reached us a few days ago that a young grandmaster from Russia, Ivan Bukavshin, suddenly passed away at the age of 20. Well, so this is the picture of Ivan, and today I want to talk about his chess. And obviously I don't really have anything else to talk about besides his chess, because I didn't have a chance to meet Ivan in person. Well, I hoped I would one day, because I really liked his chess, and I thought maybe if one day I travel to some tournament and just introduce myself, but it was not meant to be. Unfortunately. Now, obviously a lot of speculations about what happened. Well, it wasn't an accident, and it wasn't some kind of a long-term health problem. Apparently he was healthy, but suddenly he died, and with the symptoms of a stroke. I'm obviously no expert on medical matters, but I did hear somewhere that some people carry this kind of thing, in their main blood vessel there, that brings oxygen to the brain, some kind of aneurysm, and it can burst at any time, and often goes undetected. Well, obviously, it's hard to blame anybody for things like this, but I just want to say one thing, that chess is a difficult activity. It's a sport. The pressure and simply the kind of the burden, of playing chess tournaments is much harder than it may seem. While people seemingly sit around and they don't run and don't lift weights, and then don't jump, but it requires a lot of energy, and I might even say that playing chess probably is not very good for your health on the highest level. One has to learn how to pace himself, and I know a lot of examples from the chess world, players that once they realized, that their health is not quite there, then a lot of them took the right decision to stop and look for some other things to do in life. Maybe outside of chess, or maybe with chess, but not necessarily connected with chess playing. There are a lot of examples to this, and then I won't stop at naming names, I will mention one of the guys from my generation. You obviously will recognize the name. That's Sergei Dalmatov, one half of the brilliant Yusupov Dalmatov duo, the pupils of Mark Dvoretsky. Have you ever wondered why Dalmatov did not play much chess in his 30s? On his mid-20s, he was quite good. Not only he had good results in Soviet championships, he also had international success. There was a particular medical problem that precluded him from playing. Recently, I made a series of Russian Schoolboy videos on coulda, woulda, shoulda. Little I knew that another one is coming, and we're going to be doing this in the live version, talking about Ivan Bukavshin. But the man I talked about, one of the people I talked about players who departed this world young age, and they could not fully realize their potential. One of them, the last person at least, was Valery Salov, and Valery, he also had medical problems that he found very difficult to overcome in his 30s. Now, when look at the player, look at the person, doesn't mean anything. We look at Bukavshin, seemed like, this is the guy in perfect health, right? Look at his arms. Stocky, solid, guy, but unfortunately. What could have been done? In my time, in the Soviet Union, chess belonged to a kind of sports ministry and was considered to be a sport. And therefore, all chess players, they were medically screened regularly before going to tournaments, and regularly once a year or so at the Institute of Sports Medicine, where you get much more than your regular checkup, at your local physician. And this is how it was. Obviously, things probably changed in Russia. Well, Bukavshin, 20 years old. He didn't live in Moscow, he didn't live in St. Petersburg. He was actually born in Rostov-on-Don, which is in the south, it's a big city, practically next to this current war zone, the Ukrainian border, near the Donbass region. I don't know when, but I guess when in his teens, Ivan moved to the banks of River Volga in the industrial town of Taliati, which is the home to auto plants where they make Lada cars. And that's where he lived and that's where he trained. These days, I noticed that a lot of young chess players, or rather I would say second-tier chess players in Russia, they don't necessarily cluster around Moscow and Leningrad. Maybe one of the reasons is that cost of living is much higher over there. In smaller towns you can get by with much less. Really, Russia is like this now. And all the same, I guess there isn't much of incentive for Russian players of, let's say, 2600 rating or so. Yeah, that would be interesting to look at a game annotated by Joe Benjamin. I hope I chose different games, but I don't know. Well, if anything, you'll get a take from two different grandmasters on the same thing. Anyway, what I was saying, is that they didn't travel a whole lot, They just don't travel there. Well, there is plenty of tournaments for them to play. Well, they compete against each other. I don't know if it's good for their ratings. Probably not. In some ways, it's similar to what's happening with the Chinese players. Excuse me. I'm still suffering from this cold. I'll try to stop those coughing fits. Excuse me. So they don't travel a whole lot. They play tournaments in Russia, and I guess if they do this, then it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to live in Moscow, because you don't really need to catch those international flights going abroad. Alright, one last resort. I'm gonna have this little cough drop. Well, sorry, I'm gonna be making some sucking sounds, but I think it's better, than throwing coughing fits. Oh. Well, don't worry, I'm not dying yet. It's just that cold, that I had, that somehow brought some complications. Well, anyway. These days, we have to be very careful. Don't let us get old. Don't let us get sick. In the immortal words of Warren Zevon. Hi, Dragomir. Hi, everybody. So, for those of you who came late, I'm Grandmaster Alex Yermolinsky. I'm doing my live show, Russian Schoolboy Live, talking about Ivan Bukavshin, a young Grandmaster from Russia whose life was cut down in his prime, not even 21 years old. Okay, to the games. Okay, what should we start with? Okay, let them run through the moves, then I will return. Okay, so that's from Russian Cup finals. So that was very fresh, just in December. there are a lot of competitions there in which young grandmasters such as Bukavshin honed their skills. There are many others there, you know, Daniel Dubov, Fedoseev, and the youngest stars Artemiev. And these guys, no, well, what can they do? They probably wouldn't mind traveling to St. Louis or London to play against Magnus Carlsen and Anish Giri, but the doors are closed for them. Unless they get a rating up to closer to 2800. But in the meantime, you can't just expect this to happen, and you can't sit on your rating. You have to practice and play all the time. So it's happening with the Chinese guys who ended up playing each other on all numerous tournaments, and we're looking at Wei now dropping down to barely 2700. But I guess it's all temporary. So anyway, Russian Cup was one of those tournaments, the knockout tournaments. Oh, it's going to be a disaster today. Yeah. So you have to play all kinds of chess combined. Slow time control, rapid, and then blitz. Well, in a way it helps them, because when comes this World Cup, they come better trained. Thank you. For greetings from Istanbul. I'm good friends with Grandmaster Suat Atalek, of course, and I visited Istanbul. Alright, so that's one of the games was played in one of earlier rounds. His opponent is unknown to me, 2560 Grandmaster Yeliseev. Now, the game is very, very interesting. Now, off we go. Bukavshin's white. Well, the Grunfeld. No, well, everybody picks up the Grunfeld these days, right? It's the opening where if you know what you're doing, then basically you're not going to end up in the worst position. I mean, you're either going to lose the game if your knowledge is insufficient, or maybe the opponent hits you with some tremendous novelty, or you're just going to get your game off the ground and you're going to play on equal terms. Such as Peter Svidler have done many times, of course, and many other great players. Now Anish Giri and Fabiana Caruana and all, you name them. Alright, so what does Bukavshin have against it? Alright, well, this used to be called the Taimanov variation. And the most common answer, of course, is knight e4. Now, it's not good for white to take that knight. So it used to be either bishop h4 or bishop f4. It's still played, but look at this, h4. Now, Bukavshin did not invent this move. Now, this is somewhat similar to that move h4, such as Grishuk played it against Magnus Carlsen and many other games. So here it's combined with bishop g5. Alright. Let me go look at my analysis. I don't have much to say about the opening, except that if black plays bishop g7, which was played by Svidler, counting on if this captured, then eventually it's going to be c6, right? Not right away, because c7 is hanging. I assume that maybe you should take over there and play c6, and then you get to take the pawn on d4. So that has to be very good for black, because of the great fianchetted Grunfeld bishop. Yeah, we know that, but of course after bishop g7, white would do the same thing, and that's going to lead to the position in the game. So hardly any difference. So Yeliseev took, and it's probably not a mistake. Over there, takes, queen takes d5. Now, I tell you what I knew about this line. I knew very little about this line, but I thought white just plays e3. Just like they do in a similar position with the bishop on h4 and pawn on h2. And to be honest, because of that, I didn't really think much of this entire idea of h4, because I thought, what's the difference? You're not really attacking it. Most likely, when black plays c5 here, then similar to that line that Taimanov played with the bishop on h4, you just go queen f3. Then why do you need h4? Now a bishop can be pushed out of the diagonal, so you no longer will have this pressure against e7. I guess white's going to be alright anyway. But Fabiano Caruana defended this position successfully and even won his game against Alexander Morozevich. Speaking of Morozevich, right? When you look at this move h4, something makes you think of Morozevich. And indeed, he was one of the first players who ever played it. Yeah. Alright, your questions, guys. Dragomir, Buland, speak up. Alright, so Caruana played this and he had a decent game and beat Morozevich. Well, that's why I didn't think that e3 was so... I mean, the whole line was so great. But there it comes, f3. That's very ambitious. Now, as Bukavshin's style was described by many, I read an interview recently done on the popular Russian internet source, chess-news. Two guys were interviewed there, both friends and peers and colleagues of the late Ivan Bukavshin. That's Daniel Dubov and Fedoseev. What's his name? Vladimir Vyacheslav. I'm sorry. Not familiar with young players that well. Anyway, so they both said that from the very young age, and Bukavshin distinguished himself in a very young age, you know, like he played all this European and world youth championships, under 10 and under 12, and won a lot of them. He was known to be a solid positional player, so he had this great understanding and good endgame skills. But he realized, of course, as his career progressed, that he need to sharpen his play. Things will not just fall in your lap, you know, if you don't take risks. And in the recent years, he started taking more chances. That's why this game is so significant. f3. Now, if white can get this to work, then more power to him. But see this hole on g3. I don't know. Okay, c5. We're probably not going to argue with that. There. And queen d7. I guess Yeliseyev didn't want to be too obvious with this move. Maybe he thought the white would play e5. Yeah, e5 is absolutely okay in this position, because the idea of shutting down that bishop exists, even at the cost of keeping your d pawn in the back, kind of backward. But white can play like this. One question, of course, is why is the pawn on f3, but no, it had to go there. So Yeliseyev decided not to provoke his opponent, and he went back to d7. There it goes, knight e2. And of course d5. No, trademark move. White should always play this one. He has a chance. And now, because of some time that he won on this black queen moves, he is able to do this without fear of losing the exchange, because the black hasn't castled yet. So knight, of course, comes in the middle. And Bukavshin played his knight to d4, and after black castled, he went forward with h5. Now, this is a very risky move. But it's kind of hard to recognize what the problem is. Now, if also, it's not my opinion, I'm not really that familiar with Bukavshin's games to say this, but from that interview with Dubov and Fedoseev, they said that if there was one problem that Bukavshin would have to work on, was playing really irrational, super complex positions. And you can just miss ideas for yourself and for the opponent, and I guess maybe there was a tactical miss connected with the move h5. In retrospect, white should have played queen d2, which is the needed move anyway, and then look to play h5 a little later. Now, what is the problem with h5, you might ask? It's excellent reply, queen d6. So this guy Yeliseyev is not just punching bag, you know, he is looking at stuff. And now, as Bukavshin continued with queen d2, That allowed black to play a tactical shot. No, the only way to avoid it is to move the bishop away. Bishop e3. I guess it wasn't in Bukavshin's plans. I don't know if he blundered this whole thing, or maybe he thought he would have compensation, but at any rate, this move was possible. Now, you can't take with the knight because you're losing your rook. So therefore, you take this way, and now black can do this check, I assume. And then the white queen is overloaded. You must take. Queen f2 is also there. Well, Bulent, if it wasn't for this tactic, then I would agree with you. But as it happens sometimes in chess, there is just one move, just one tactical idea that Yeliseyev found that really changes the evaluation. Now, I'm looking at this position after queen takes g5. I would give white compensation. And it's connected with both with attack and chances and maybe even with some positional compensation. Well, because even if the game goes to the end game, white would have the very active king and strong pawns in the center. But can I really say that white is better here? I'm not sure. I can play this move, trying to keep all my threats there and hoping that black will freak out and go queen f6. Then in the endgame, white will really have a lot. But what if black plays e5? I'm not sure, White's king is also very shaky. I think black absolutely had to play it. Because that was the idea of the move queen d6. Now, Yeliseyev goes bishop d7. Now, trade, followed by this. Okay, the combination no longer works, right? Because white now can take back with the knight. There is no rook on a1. And then the bishop is protected twice. So, okay, well, there was a sticky moment, but hey, sometimes you go through this. Let's see how the game developed. Rook c8. Very standard plan with typical Grunfeld counterplay. Maybe Yeliseyev thought, that there was no need for him to trade down and give white easier play in some endgame. Maybe he thought that attack was coming to nothing and black will just have strong counterattack. But bishop h6. Queen there. It was very hard to predict what Bukavshin had in mind. King f2. Leading with the king. What's the point of this? No, the answer is quite simple. The white king is just getting off the back rank. Preparing, clearing out this. So white is prepares to double up the rooks. Now, this move, knight c4, in this position, it's playable, of course. There's no doubt about it. But then white has this pretty strong knight. I wonder how white is going to proceed in this position. Not entirely obvious. Would be nice to double up the rooks and go rook h8. I believe that with the queen, maybe white will be better against the two rooks because of the strong central formation. But if the knight requires protection now, then it's hard to double up the rooks. So therefore, perhaps, white should do something else. He can move the queen away. He has various options. He's got this, for example. That looks pretty decent move. Hits the knight, hits the pawn on e7, on b7 as well. Most likely, he's going to have to go back. Then white can continue his operations there. Alright. Queen f6 was played. Now, perhaps black thought that with the idea of knight g4 he will have some more tactical chances. King g3. Yeah, you probably remember that famous game with the king joining the attack that Nigel Short won against Jan Timman. No, it's not gonna come to this. The white king is not quite getting to h6, but nonetheless, it's pretty impressive. I would say it's even more impressive because in that game I mentioned, Short Timman, black was like absolutely, totally paralyzed. Could not move one thing. And Short just drove his king up to make decisive threats. Here, black has pieces that can do things. Nonetheless, king g3. Okay, this. And back. And very quiet move. In preparation to double up. Now, the key is that black is unable to oppose the rooks on the h-file. Think, if we do it this way, take and then we try to double up. Then suppose black plays b5. You do this, and then rook h8 is possible. And it's really questionable if white's going to be able to obtain any advantage. Maybe he could. He will trade the rooks and take on c4 and try to bring the king. Well, perhaps. But also b5 is not the only option. Maybe black should choose to move that knight to some other square. Possibly even d6. And now he's ready to oppose with rook h8. Yeah, but Bukavshin found the way. This is a very nice move to secure the h-file for his rooks. Oops, you can go rook h8 because your knight is hanging. White won the key tempo. Came this, and now f4. Already black's position is very alarming. I thought I would play e5 here, but then of course takes. No, I'll just try this. Oh boy, that's embarrassing. No, of course, it takes this way. I don't know what white would choose to do here. Well, he has the straightforward plan of just taking here. Now, if king takes, then the bishop g4 is gonna square. So he has to do this check. White says thank you. And goes up. Goes check. Goes rook d1. The king will come to g5. That's domination. Very difficult position for black. Well, I'm familiar with this kind of stuff because I always played kind of a straight up, main line against the Grunfeld with white. And sometimes, well, with help of my opponents, I would get a position like this. Yeliseyev tried a different move. Knight went back to f3. Cute! Threatening mate. Bishop is taboo. Okay, but that's just repeated. Then it goes rook b1. Now, this was unnecessary. This was really unnecessary. And clearly, move 33, probably time trouble. I don't know. I think this was pretty good. You have a mate in one threat. Now you can do this. What is black going to do? He absolutely has to give up the pawn. Okay, we'll take it. Bring the king over there. And now white will proceed with knight g5 and then winning the pawn in f7. That looks crushing. I don't think there is any way for black to defend this position. That huge unit, that white has. King, knight, and 3 pawns. Should overcome, well, any kind of defense there. Now, perhaps a little materialistic. No, well, we're talking about a 20-year-old player. So some things, well, I mean, seriously, I'll tell you this. If you're only looking at guys like Fischer, Capablanca, I don't know, Kasparov, Carlsen, Giri, Nakamura should be included there. We basically talk about people who somehow got it. a very young age, they just had this extreme clarity of thought, that guided them through complicated positions. And most of the decisions they took, they were right decisions. That's why it's recognizable. That's why Vladimir Kramnik 5 years ago said, yeah, Carlson thinks that he needs to get by us old guys and then he's gonna reign there, for decades. Not true. There is Giri. So Kramnik already noticed Anish Giri when Giri was, 16 years old. Because those things are visible. But it doesn't mean that others cannot play chess. And it's work in progress, You have to work on your game and just get things, get your ducks in a row, if you wish. Get things together and just improve. Just like club players. Just like experts try to improve to become masters. Like masters try to improve and become grandmasters and all that. Same thing, that work continues for a 2600 grandmaster. Bukavshin was 2657. But he was on his way to 2700. Before we say what's 2700 these days, and he was 4 years older than VE, yeah, that's true. But who knows, people have different curve of improvement. We've seen some players who appear to be spent, in their late 20s already and simply could not elevate their game anymore, couldn't even stay on the same level. And some of them were great prodigies. I'll mention Peter Leko. Well, who knows where Bukavshin's curve, how far it would take him. But Rook B1, I know it wins the pawn and all that, and the rook's coming from the other side. But King G4 was better, straightforward. Now, oh boy, these guys are scrappy, Look what this guy's doing. It's really safe. White is so close to checkmating that king, but he just can't. The pawn came under attack. And then check came e6. Black, right circumstances, can counterattack the white king. This material, 2 rooks and knights on the board, so much given to tactics. That's what Black is doing now, but Bukavshin handles it very well. Now he's got his king away from checks and grabs the pawn. Now he's got the absolute 7th with 2 rooks, and the black rook is tied up to f8. But still not easy to checkmate Black. The best move would be this, obviously. To bring the knight to f5 and continue bothering the white king with these checks. Now, where do you go? If you go to h3, you don't have g4. But on the other hand, Black can hardly go after the pawn, because if he does that, g4 will be played. And the rook on f8 is paralyzed. So maybe Black just does nothing here and plays this. Now I don't know. I mean, there are some interesting moves here. Maybe this is possible. Are you checkmating him after, say, knight e5? Is this mate on f7? Unstoppable unless you give up a knight. Yeah, white is still better, but knight d6 was the only way to continue. Rook c1 was an error. And now knight h2. Probably stronger was knight e5, but I think that gets the job done anyway. Nice maneuver. King's out of the way, and next is knight g4 check. Knight's under attack, and then you either pick off the rook or maybe go for mate. Either way. No. Resigns. I bet Bukavshin would have gone for mate. Mate and 2. Well, nice game. Nice game. I know it's not clean. I know there are mistakes made, but I like the general direction, that white sent the game with this unusual and sharp and ambitious way of meeting the Grunfeld. I mean, guys, this is really something, h4. Yeah, I should probably give it another look. Okay. I have more games, of course. We're not gonna run out of games. That you can be sure of. I was talking a lot about the feedback for my shows, and indeed, you guys should log on to this ICC. I don't know, was it a message board or anyway, some kind of a forum, and you can send your questions and requests, and they find me and I look at them, and one request that kind of won out, and I wanted to have a show on this, was defending tough positions, finding tactical moves. And it would have been the entire show if it wasn't for, this tragic story with Ivan Bukavshin. And as luck would have it, I found a game where Bukavshin was on the defensive side. Okay, let's let it play it out. Now we go to starting position. So that's from the same tournament, in the later stages of the knockout tournament. Russian Cup final. It's already a semi-final stage. And Bukavshin's opponent is, no, he's in his 30s, but kind of, I don't know, call him a granddaddy, of those modern Russian chess scene. Okay, maybe not granddaddy, call him daddy. Denis Hizmatulin. This guy plays all the time, and he plays almost exclusively in Russia. Travels from one town to another. Those tournaments are rarely held in Moscow or St. Petersburg. It's usually either on the Volga or in Siberia, and everywhere there is a tournament, Hizmatulin is always there. He's a tough competitor, and we saw him, and together with Bukavshin, they both qualified and played in the recent Russian Super Final, which was convincingly won by Tomaszewski. And, well, by the way, Tomaszewski is what? Nakamura's age, right? So he's 28 years old. And he made a big step forward in the past 2 years or so. So it's possible. That's why I mean, obviously, well, not for Bukavshin, but somebody else from his generation, and if they're in the early 20s, they can still improve. So this Bukavshin and Hizmatulin played each other very many times, and they're always interesting games. Alright, so we're gonna go to this one from the beginning. Now, I believe that was game 1. So nobody has to win yet. Alright, guys, questions. Is this live, really? Yeah, it is live. Oh, come on, Iran. Just ask me a question, You wanna have a proof that you actually talking to typing to the live show. Well, just type something. Type your question. I'll be happy to answer. So actually, these two players are similar to each other in both chess-wise and even physical appearance. Both kind of big, strong guys. Little bit, this positional style, but also backed up by calculation. Dubov and Fedoseev, two of Bukavshin's friends, they pointed out that Bukavshin calculated everything during his games. It's important, I was one of these guys, kind of, after wasting away my best years, just playing some random tournaments in the Soviet Union, but I kind of got my act together to, in my late 20s and early 30s, I just forced myself to calculate more and not just rely on general positional considerations. Well, that's the way to go. That's the way it was 30 years ago or whatever, and it was 20 years ago, and that's the way to do it now. Yeah, there is this obscure line a little bit. So going queen c2 immediately. Yeah, it has some merit, you know. If black takes on c4, then white already takes. So possibly like in reply to a6, you know, can do this kind of stuff. And now if you go b5, similar, right? Hoping to put the bishop on b7. And among other moves, I mean, this one is quite interesting. Look, black is unable to play knight d5 because of the mate. So somewhat ugly move rook a7 is forced, and I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's interesting. So there is some merit in queen c2, but no, c5 is the most common answer. With black, I prefer to take on c4. I don't like the old system with c6 and knight d7. I played it, and I could still play it in a pinch, but I would only do it if the white knight is already on d2. It depends on the move order. For example, well, what if I play this kind of stuff with black, right? And I play this move c6. Some people, they may get scared of this d takes c4, like the notable variation, and they might just go knight d2. In this position, I can go to the old Catalan, because I think that knight on d2 is less active. But when white has the option of putting the knight on c3, I wouldn't want to go c6. So, most of the time I take on c4 in this position, if I like that. What's the general plan for white in Queen's Gambit declined? No, well, this is the Catalan, it's a different opening. Well, that's the way where your bishop's looking. Now, in a Catalan, you look on queen side. You're trying to unload the center and put pressure with that bishop on b7 pawn and prevent this guy from coming out. When you play Queen's Gambit declined, your bishop is on d3, and you're basically aiming to put your pawn to e5, drive the knight away from f6, and then go for the Greek gift, bishop takes h7, in a nutshell. Two different openings. But sometimes attacking chances can be developed. Anyway, c5, castles. Now, there was this game, Giri Kramnik. I just talked about these two guys, right? Well, Kramnik is number 2, Giri is number 3 in the world. So they're quite up there. Both of them going to be... Oh, I almost said that Kramnik was going to be in the candidates. I still cannot wrap my mind around the fact that we're not going to have Vladimir Kramnik in the candidates tournament. Bizarre. Anyway, yeah, Anish is going to be playing in Moscow, of course, in the candidates. So Kramnik, well... Kramnik doesn't have that much time to waste. Well, he's already going on 41, so maybe one more cycle, but not more. Bishop b4 and bishop e7 is very interesting. Yeah. Well, different ideas. Well, pick your poison, you know. Look at games of Kramnik for both covers. Look, rather than asking me, I'm not really a Catalan player with white. I always play the white side of the Queen's Gambit and all different interpretations. Very rarely I play the Catalan. Besides, you know, well, Kramnik is bigger authority anyway. Take my advice. Select games of Vladimir Kramnik in the Catalan, for both covers, by the way, and just play them over, from beginning to the end. Just try to see how this game flows and how the ideas that form in the opening, how they carry over to the middle game and then to the end game. And that should be done before you touch any books. I mean, opening manuals. Now, so this is the line that Giri played against Kramnik. And Kramnik played standard move knight c6, and now Giri took and then played this. Guess what, guys? It's a Grunfeld reversed. You see how good the Grunfeld is? You want to play it with white as well. Kramnik had to work for a draw here. After the game, he said that he wasn't happy with his position out of the opening. Now, he didn't offer anything in the way of improvement. Maybe he wanted to keep it a secret for next encounters. That's his prerogative, of course. Or maybe he just didn't know how to meet this system. Now, Bukavshin plays this move. Now, this is extremely interesting. So the knight goes on the edge of the board just to avoid this exchange on c6. Logically, takes, then knight b4, back. No, white is actually happy because he's thinking, okay, I'm gonna push this guy, push him back. Now this looks like a good position. There's possibility of going e5. And then that knight, and if you go back to b4, it can be attacked with a3. Where do you go then? To c6 to make a weak pawn? Looks good. But there is a particular way to reply. That's what Bukavshin played. So, he moves the e-pawn forward. White's trying to attack this pawn, because otherwise black will have a pretty decent position in the, because his bishop then can develop. No choice but to go forward. And now, I assume in reply to this, black takes and stands reasonably well, because he prevented the white pawn from going forward. Okay. But his Matovan plays the principled move. Now we're about to see if Bukavshin's idea, which by the way is very original. Look, it's the second game I'm showing you today, and both feature very original opening ideas. Goes to show how creative was Bukavshin's work on his openings. He wasn't just repeating, something that top players play. He was looking for his own ways. Admirable. e3, I guess that's the only way, otherwise you can't really save this pawn. All based on a tactic, right? Bishop takes. Now, white absolutely hates allowing knight takes e3. On the other hand, the knight is hanging. So what do? You're gonna have to move your knight back, and then he takes on e3 and messes up your pawns. And who knows, he may end up with that fork on c2. Right? In this line. Chop. Hello? Yeah, you can't let this happen. His Matulin plays the right move. He absolutely has to protect the pawn on d5. Yeah, it's annoying to have the pawn on f2. It's gonna be there for quite some time, by the way. Now, white is hoping to do what? Eventually capture that pawn, and most importantly, connect his pawns in the middle and hopefully go e5. Black has to be thinking of protecting the f2 pawn, but it cannot really be protected directly. I mean, well, it can be held for a while, but eventually black is going to have to use tactics. So that's to that question, how to, not question, rather request, to show you a game where one side cleverly uses tactics from a difficult position. Okay. I guess this is forced, right? What to do? If you go this way, then you lose d5. He won't take right away. Because the bishop is overloaded, now must protect h3. Knight f3, of course, interferes with the bishop and also loses the pawn, so no other choice but to play e3. Oh, these games are complex, huh? White is gonna lose the b pawn, but maybe he doesn't care, he wants to take the g5 pawn. Ultimately, it's all about the kings, right? It's probably one of the sharper positions you can get from the Catalan opening. Okay, let's see. Queen b6. Protects f2, and hits before. Queen takes. White probably cannot give up the pawn on b2 because that would make this knight very shaky. He also has this a bit of a problem here because there is this move, right? I mean, you lose this with check. You can't really take on e7. So, and then how do you protect your bishop on g5? Even this, okay, I don't know what's best here, but maybe just queen takes f4 followed by the fork. That's one possibility. There is also bishop takes g5 to continue then with knight f2 check. Yeah, so white is not quite ready, so he goes queen d2. Very complex situation. How do you like it so far, guys? I think it's very exciting. Now knight g4. It's a very interesting situation here. Soon the bishop's gonna be exchanged. By the way, one has to give credit to his Matovan for taking with the pawn. A lot of people would say, forget about it, I'm gonna take with the queen. He figured out that this endgame is gonna be real difficult to win. Just because white cannot line up his pawns, and he's got a lot of things to worry about. Well, black probably will take on g2 at some moment, so he can attack and hit the pawn on d5, but he wants to make sure he first goes rook a8 to stop this e4. If white cannot connect his f, e, and d together, then his material advantage may be meaningless. Instead, g takes f4. That's very risky. Now, Bukavshin goes back. How come? No, well, simple. Hello, checkmate. Alright, so this, we're talking about using tactics. Now, the knight is going to have to sit on g4 for some time. Knight d1. Rook a8. I think possibly Bukavshin had the same idea to go knight to e3. Because then he's probably going to win the h3 pawn and, well, just get enough going over there. But his Matulin didn't let him do this. He goes e4. Okay, you don't like to play this kind of complicated positions with either side. Now, neither did I. Now, what was I in my 20s? 2450 to 2470 to 2500. Considering that ratings weren't the same as they are now, after the inflation, I guess it was a pretty decent rating, and that maybe equals today's 2550 or 2570. Now, how long did I play at this level? For about 7 years. Isn't it enough time to become frustrated with your inability to elevate your game on next level? I mean, I don't know. Well, people can find excuses, say, oh, I don't know. Well, I'm not given enough opportunities, or I don't know. My country doesn't love me. My wife doesn't love me. I don't know. I'm this poor me, but ultimately, you run out of excuses and you just get your act together and start working. And you realize at some moment that the reason that it doesn't work for you that well because you're not putting enough pressure on your opponents. And when you don't put pressure on your opponents, then they all play like Anatoly Karpov. They never make mistakes. Now, a difficult position is difficult for both players. What goes around comes around. It's difficult for you, difficult for your opponent. Easy for you, easy for your opponent. So pick your poison. Queen h6. Pins there 4 pawns, so white is planning to play e5, but now black can just take on e5. The queen is not protected. Oh boy. White is not ready to take on f2, right? You don't want to lose the pawn on h3. Yeah, granted, you have strong pawns in the center, but, no, well, you're not guaranteed that you can trade queens. So there could be adventurous right for white. Good move, queen d3. Actually, both players play this about as well as humanly possible in under the circumstances in a knockout match. Here a5 was possible, but Denis, I think he got little tired of this tension and moving the pawn forward, who knows, it potentially may allow black to occupy the f5 square. So he decided to trade queens, and for that the rook had to come to support the queen. There you go. White is still better. Knight f6. I disagree with Bukavshin here. I think he had to jump on opportunity to do this trade. Give up his bishop and knight for a rook, but most importantly, the pawn on a4. So suppose white takes, grab this guy, and eliminate the key pawn. Now the rook's becoming active because of open files. Now you do this. The white rook is kinda out of play. The d pawn, no, well, you have the best defender, the rook behind that passed pawn. If you can play this and pick off b2, now this will come down the board real fast. I think black is okay in this position. I don't know what Bukavshin didn't like about it. He went back. Now his position looks lost, right? He's down a central pawn, and he's not doing anything with his pawn advantage. Effectively, it's like 2 pawns down when you look at the center of the board. His rooks are not super active. White has everything compact, everything defended. But you look for things. No, it's a great move. I know, he didn't like... yeah, I guess... the difference is that after rook takes b7, maybe he's just gonna go rook to b8. Is that possible? I mean, he could take, but that would be like move transposition. I guess it's also not so clear. Now, black just wants to play rook b8 with the counter-attack against b2. There is also fork here. I mean, hey, indeed, why not? Why not take the exchange and then play rook b8? Yeah, that's the reason. So his Maturin has to keep his rook on the third. Now comes the attack on this. Constant tactical threats. Rook f2 at what moment? At what moment rook f2? Instead of knight takes f2, I assume. Okay, let me backtrack. No. E4 is under attack. No rook takes f2. You cannot give up e4. E4 is the key. I guess it's the same thing, guys. If you look at what happened in the game, it doesn't matter. He goes bishop b5 anyway. They just played one extra move, rook there and bishop there, but ultimately returns. Now the problem is that if you move this rook to here, then you allow this move. Your rook has to go away, and now you lose the pawn on f4. That's the inventiveness that black has to show, and that keeps him afloat. After bishop b5, your knight is on f2. No, you're mixing it up. Bulend, your knight is on f2 when black plays bishop b5. Just look at this position. You can never play a rook to f2. It doesn't matter. You can't. Your knight occupies the f2 square. So he played rook e1. Now comes this. When at moment when it seemed like that black totally out of targets, he finds one. He wants to take. What a joke it is, eh? But it's good. On d6 he's gonna go rook d8. Now if you do this, he will take. It's amazing how black is able to find some fault in white's seemingly perfect formation. And that's time trouble for sure. Then comes rook c1. Rook b3. Alright, different strategy from white now. Now he realizes he's not gonna win the game for free, as they say. He's gonna have to slug it out. So he needs to take the pawn on b7 and combine the strength of his d5 pawn, possibly with some threats against the black king. But look at Bukavshin. f5 of all moves. The rook was attacking the knight. Now look, I can't go back. I'm sorry. If I missed it, I missed it. I apologize. I have to get going. Now, f5. It wasn't forced, but I guess sometimes you just have to... It's... well, it's a real game, right? So, obviously, you know, there are two players. They go through emotional roller coaster all the time. You know, like you think you're winning and suddenly there are problems and then you don't know how to solve it. And then, well, you seize this moment of weakness and decisiveness in your opponent and you want to play the most resolute, the most decisive way and to pose more problems and drive him to more time trouble. That's where f5 comes from. But, well, in retrospect, maybe we look at this and say, hey, you know, you can play this position. Rook there and then trade, and just hold it. Indeed, after eliminating this pawn, black already accomplished a lot. Now, e5 is not coming. A d6 pawn going forward may end up separated too far. In the meantime, if white wants to bring the king up, black happily plays g5 and has some kind of a blockade. Now, you can't move this knight away. You move the knight away, you don't win the game. He's gonna trade everything. That's gonna be a draw for sure. So, I don't know. But f5, that's ultra sharp. Now, rook takes b7. This move. So that's what he wants to. He actually wants to attack. So in reply to this, black perhaps is planning to play this one. Attacking the knight. It's pretty difficult. It's awkward to defend against all this. You do this, it's probably already a kind of position that is going to be impossible to win. Look at this bishop coming to b7. Look at that diagonal. White's pawns are all split. I don't think white can win this. It's probably more like a draw. Yermolinsky finds a great idea. I mean, it's amazing how well these guys play, you know, in the real long time in complex positions. I understand, you know, like, this is different kind of chess, but I always thought that... well, it's not like I'm questioning. Obviously, Giri or Caruana or MVL, they're better, more accomplished players than Yermolinsky or Bukavshin. But different tournaments, they dictate different kind of chess. And I find always very exciting to follow games from Russian tournaments. And it's not because I'm on some sort of nostalgia thing, you know, and then just because I really, truly find these games very interesting and player styles very attractive. So after forcing the bishop to the passive position, he bears down on the 7th. This has to be over, right? This is mate. Well, not quite. Alright. Okay, let's take stock. White is 1 pawn ahead, but extremely unpleasant is e3. It's coming up. I mean, there is one way, only one way to solve this problem, right? But you only need one way to solve this problem. You just need to play this and that. And if takes... No, actually not. What am I talking about? It's too early. No, he played the right move. He played the right move, of course. This, driving the bishop to h7. And now you need to take this thing. If his Matolin took that thing, I think he would be winning, because now because of mate, black simply cannot keep that knight. He has to go back rook to the 7th, and then... No, it's 2 pawns ahead. It's still not going to be very easy, because white's long ways away from supporting that pawns with the king, but still, up 2 pawns it has to be. Well, it's a strange feeling, that some players... No, every once in a while, on every level, you get this absolutely crazy game. Well, and hopefully we're going to have them this coming Saturday, round 1 vacancy. And more in every tournament. And chess is very interesting these days. I think that provides us with great enjoyment and entertainment. But there is something there, that makes those players take even more chances, because I guess, maybe they don't really care much for their rating. They just try to win those tournaments. And as knockouts go, you win. I mean, you probably double your money every time you win a match. So there is a lot of incentive to play for a win in every game. I always liked the knockout system, and I think it's going to make its comeback one way or another. There's obvious reluctance, because, that kind of keeps your privilege down to minimum, and makes the field a little too wide open, and then they complain, because of the blunder, we now don't have, now insert a name there, in the tournament. But that's what it is, and I mean, don't forget that, most sports, they work ultimately by single elimination. In the playoffs, all American sports, NCAA basketball, football. Okay, in baseball you have 5-game or 7-game series, but things happen. That's the beauty of sports. And if chess wants its part there, I think Magnus Carlsen is right. And in some ways, I hate to admit it, but Kirsanov Amzhinov was right. It's just hard to overcome this resistance, this inertia, of players that seem... Well, they have to protect their turf, right? They say, I didn't become a 2800 player to play some lousy knockouts, when I may get eliminated and not get my lion's share. Yeah, games are very complex. Yeah, this would be a great line. His Matulin didn't find it. Ultimately, it cost him, because as this game, you will see, it was drawn a few moves, and Bukavshin won the next game and went to the finals, and ultimately won the Russian Cup. No, it's not guaranteed, of course. If his Matulin won this game, he would have gone through. Well, Bukavshin would have had white next game. But knight d1, backing down the wrong moment. Now, even if white thought that he stopped this, but in a way, the pawn on e4 separates his bishop from the d5 pawn, and the knight on d1 relegated to protecting b2. You can't win this position. Now the pawn went forward. It's a tactical move, and this. Now, is white still better? Probably. I just don't think he's winning anymore. I was looking. Rook g4 is okay. Knight there. Looking to play d6, but I don't know. He goes there, and then he goes what? there. It goes knight f6. I mean, clearly you're not queening this pawn. The position of this rook is great. Black has the same idea he utilized in the game, to exchange and win the d6 pawn. The h pawn is not a factor, obviously. Not going to be a factor for a long time. Hardly any difference in this line. Even if he managed to get the rook behind the d pawn, now this is very annoying. Once again, the inventiveness of Bukavshin. Well, he just wants to push this pawn forward. Who says that this pawn's gonna stop? It's not gonna stop. It's gonna go very far. And Black is perfectly willing to give up the knight for the d pawn. No, after this, there's just nothing to do. I mean, this knight is going to be lost. Absolutely, I have to go d7 and then... No, well, it's one pawn each, so I guess the game is going to be drawn. Draw agreed. Heroic defense from Ivan Bukavshin, and... no, once again, I can't describe how sorry I am, for this happened. We all lost, our brother, in arms, and the age of 20, words totally fail me. But we'll remember the games of Ivan Bukavshin, and well, life goes on. We'll try to do our best as chess players. Well, I guess that would be it for today. And thank you guys for staying with me. This was Grandmaster Alex Yermolinsky, and my pleasure to give you my live report of every Russian Schoolboy Knows. Make sure that you follow our coverage, which is going to come in different form this year. From the YKZ tournament, it's going to be extensive format, game of the day with more games and fragments. I'm in charge of the first one, which should come out this Saturday. Stay tuned, and thank you for watching.